welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Weisheit, licensed clinical social worker. Thank you so much for joining us, however you may be joining us. I am so very glad to be able to have with us some people who are truly out to make a difference and to listen to what's happening with consumers. They've got a lot of information. So for the next few segments, we're going to spend some time talking about the importance of really learning what to do and how to do it when we're trying to figure out if, in fact, we're having some fraud issues that are taking place with us. So we welcome the ADA down in Lafourche, Greg Stolniker. Greg, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, we appreciate that. Sitting next to him also, Assistant District Attorney Lisa Pinu. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us today.
All right, and sitting next to her, investigator Christy Pepper. Thank you for joining us, Christy.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And so one of these things that you guys felt was really important was to develop this contract fraud task force. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it, but it was something that was really important to do, right, Greg?
It was, and we owe all the credit to Christine Russell. She knew right after the storm that she didn't want to wait. She'd seen a lot of other problems from previous storms occur. So she said immediately she's going to form this task force, assemble it with us, and so we can get a head start. You know, we didn't want to wait too long, so these fraudulent activities continue to happen, and we want to be out in the forefront.
Wow. And so this has got a lot of different working parts, right? This is not just the district attorney's office. This involves some other places and people, right?
It does. It also involves the sheriff's office, the AG's office, the Better Business Bureau, and also the Louisiana State Board for Contractors. It's a task force involving all these agencies. We have regular meetings, and we're able to communicate with everybody so that we can make sure everybody's abreast of all the new information. Well,
and that's really important. And the most amazing thing is that y'all were able to start this at a time when everybody else was scrambling with all of the issues that we've had, individual issues that people have had, and y'all have started this to really make the public aware of what to do and how to do it if and when there's fraud, right?
That's correct. And like I said, Ms. Russell didn't want to wait. We were in touch with some other parishes that have dealt with some recent storms. We've met with their task force to learn the do's and the don'ts so we can also, you know, navigate the problems that may arise. So we wanted to make sure that we get out in front of it all.
Okay, and so I think very often people, they get confused about what is a civil issue versus what is a criminal issue. Can we clarify that a little bit? Would you guys want to maybe tell us a little bit about the difference between those and how we address that?
Sure. So just because something's criminal doesn't mean necessarily that it doesn't have a civil aspect. They're often intertwined, but to learn to see if it rises to a criminal case, you're going to have to go look at the code, and there's some gray area in there, but we're going to go look at the code, make sure that it has the criminal element. Now, just because it's not criminal doesn't mean that there's not some help that can be, you know, sought, which is why we're in touch with the AG's office, the Better Business Bureau, and the Louisiana State Board of Contractors. And we can direct people that maybe have a civil case and direct them to somebody that can actually help them if there's not a criminal aspect. But when it starts out criminally, we're going to send out the sheriff's office. They're going to go get reports. They're going to get documents and start making a case. And then it's going to come to our office, and we're going to review and make sure that it meets the level of a criminal case. And at that point, you know, we're going to start that function.
Yeah. Any additions to that, Lisa?
Well, I just wanted to say briefly that Ms. Russell did start this task force. In addition to having specialized prosecutors in our office has a lot of prosecutors who are in specialty areas. My role as an assistant district attorney is to handle cases involving elderly citizens of Lafourche Parish and elderly victims. So that is why I'm on the task force, because unfortunately our senior citizens sometimes do fall prey to bad actors, and sometimes they're taken advantage of, and they tend to be people who have savings and resources. So that is why they are victimized. But we really believe in our office that if we can educate the public, we can prevent them from becoming victims. So this is just one of many opportunities Ms. Russell has taken as her tenured DA to educate the public. We're very active with educating. So that is why I think this task force works, because we want to educate in addition to prosecuting. And as far as this difference between civil and criminal, a lot of cases are criminal because the person doesn't perform the work within 45-day period. So once you receive payment as a contractor, you are obligated to start the job within 45 days. So that is a lot of the cases that we see where that contractor does not start the work. So that is a good rule of thumb. And we're going to offer some tips later in the program as to how to prevent yourself from being a victim. But that is a lot of the cases that we see are criminal. It's not that the work is not precisely to your satisfaction. If the work is done and it passes inspection, but maybe you don't like the color or the finish on your walls or the roofing shingle color, that doesn't make it criminal. What makes it criminal is when someone takes your money and does not perform the job, by and large. But any gray areas, we have law enforcement involved with the task force, and they can assist you in helping you make that determination.
Well, and it's a really important point, especially for someone like you who specializes in dealing with our seniors, because those are the people that can get more confused about what someone is or isn't doing, because things change all the time. The older they get, the more things change. They aren't aware necessarily of some of the law changes, or that there's this task force that takes place, and they believe inherently that people are doing the right thing and that people are good, I think. And there are people that after these kinds of storms are not necessarily coming for the good of our local people. They're coming to maybe potentially harm them. And so that's really, really important. Let's talk a little bit about what happens when somebody wants to make a complaint to the task force and what they need to do and how the consistency of the team members.
Okay, in the case when someone thinks that they may be a victim of fraud or just questions where they're at in the actual process, the first point of contact would be through the sheriff's office, so the Lafourche Parish Sheriff's Office. They call the number like they would for any other kind of complaint. A calls for service will be initiated. And what will happen at that point is there's 2 specific detectives who are assigned to the task force, so they won't be routed from one person to the next. These 2 detectives have a phone specifically for only these type of complaints. They'll listen to whoever calls in, try and help them out, figure out whether it'll be criminal or civil. If they feel that it arises to the criminal aspect, then they'll go out and they'll get documentation from them. They'll take pictures. They will actually write up an actual call and then refer it over to the district attorney's office when it's ready for prosecution.
And then the consistency on that side are people present.
Right. At the DA's office, there's 2 specific ADAs, and those are Greg and Lisa, who are assigned to prosecuting the contractor fraud cases, and I'm the specific investigator, the DA investigator assigned to that.
Okay. Now let's talk maybe a couple of examples so people can know what is maybe civil, what is criminal, just if you could kind of let them know what we're dealing with.
Okay. Lisa kind of touched on that earlier, and the biggest criminal aspect to most of these is once the payment is made, work needs to be started within 45 days. If that work is not started within 45 days, then we definitely have some type of criminal aspect there. Also, if you put a down payment down and they don't do any type of work and they want to come back and get some more money even before the 45 days because they may have possibly used that money towards another job, that is not okay according to the contractor fraud law.
Okay.
And then as far as a civil process goes, if they come out there and they do some work and then they don't come back for a few days because they have other jobs, but they did it within the 45 days, then we may hit some gray areas there, and that's where Greg and Lisa and I will have to dig further into it and figure that out, because that's a little gray area.
And again, one of the things that we kind of learned from the AG's office is that 25% is kind of the standard. That's based on a typical contract, 25%. If somebody's asking you for half or for all of the money, that should throw up a red flag.
Absolutely.
And so it's something that people need to be aware of. But there are some tips that y'all have for people. Let's start going through that a little bit about letting people know how to be on the lookout for this contractor fraud and what some of those tips are.
So one of the first things that you can do, one of the most important things you could do, is you go make sure that they have a license. So to be a contractor in the state of Louisiana, you have to have a license, you have to be bonded, you have to have insurance. So you can go on to the Louisiana State Board for Licensed Contractors and make sure that they're valid. They have an app that's actually updated every 10 minutes. So if somebody's lost their license, within 10 minutes, it's going to be up there. So we would implore people to, go check. And I understand a lot of people may not have internet access right now. So a lot of people are calling the sheriff's office, and the detectives that are handling this case are able to look up that information for you. To say, hey, this person's been around. Are they licensed? So that'd be the first thing to look at. Additionally, make sure that they have a permit. So not only must you be licensed with the state, you must have your local permits. That's very important. And after you've gone through those first 2 processes and you're trying to select a contractor, try and get some references. Talk to people, not only the references they give you, because it could be a friend or family member that's just trying to say this person, is a valid contractor. talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, get on social media, try and see if anybody's dealt with them before, because I'm sure in times like this, somebody's heard of them, dealt with them. It's very important to get these, references when a lot of people, like you stated earlier, coming in from out of town. You may not have heard of this person before, so make sure and get as much information as you can, because if they're not who they say they are, they're not licensed, and they go off to Texas, it's going to be really hard to find out who they are if you don't get their name. Try and ask for their insurance policy number, their address. Things like that are some really good tips to start off with.
And you can get their license number. If they're licensed, they have a license number, right? And now, is there a permit process that out-of-towners have to go through that we know of in the area? And I'm throwing that out at you. I'm sorry.
There is, and right now there's no excuse not to have a local permit. It was waived by the parish president, Archie Chasson.
Right.
So the process is quick and easy, simple. So it doesn't cost you anything. There's no excuse not to have that.
There's no reason why somebody should not have a permit.
Correct.
Okay, very good. And so, again, do we know what that app is where people can go to check that?
It's the Louisiana State Board for Contractors.
Okay.
You can just go on any smart device and download that app.
Okay.
And they have a lot of information on there, some do's, some don'ts, some extra tips. And it's a really informative, great app and website.
And again, one of the things that you talked about, and Christy brought this up earlier, there's 2 detectives that are assigned from Lafourche Parish Sheriff's Office that are following with these kinds of cases. And for people that don't have internet, because I can tell you, there's a large percentage of people that are in Lafourche Parish that do not have internet still. There are a lot of people in Turbine Parish that do not have that. And so it's important for people to know that they can call to the Sheriff's Office and they'll help them with that.
It's very important. We wanted to ensure that the parish wanted to ensure that the Sheriff's Office, Craig Weber, and our office wanted to ensure that when you're dealing with your case, you're dealing with us directly. You know who you're talking to. You're not talking to somebody that's anonymous. You can be dealing with the same detectives. You can be dealing with the same assistant district attorneys throughout the entire process. We're going to be there for you. The Sheriff's Office is going to be there. The parish is going to be there for you. It's going to be us consistently from now to the end.
Lisa, go through some more of these tips that people just need to be aware of, some things they need to think about as we're trying to prevent being taken advantage of with some fraud.
One of the most important tips that we can offer your listeners is that to hire a licensed contractor. Under Louisiana law, it is a criminal offense if you work on a job that exceeds $7,500 if you are not licensed. So that is a threshold that the majority of the people in our area are going to meet with the roofing damage. And we would encourage you strongly to hire a contractor or a roofer that is licensed through the state of Louisiana. Having a license in Louisiana, the state licensing board requires workers' comp insurance on the people who work for this contractor. They require liability insurance. They require $10,000 in the bank account. They require that they take tests so that they're competent to do the work for you. So all of those items protect you as a consumer when you hire someone that has a license. And also, you can consult the state licensing board website to see if that contractor has ever been in trouble before, or has had any violations, or has had the license suspended. So we would encourage people to do that. So while the Lafourche Parish president has waived the fees for you to obtain a license for Lafourche, the state, you still have to be required under state law to have a license to work in Louisiana. So be very careful. If someone from out of state, you're considering hiring them for your job, make sure that they are also licensed in Louisiana so that you have a remedy if you are taken advantage of. We also want people to be aware that it's important to get several estimates for your job. That will tell you if one of the prices, it may just be too low. That might give you a hint that the person is not on the up and up, or maybe they're not carrying that insurance, or they don't have that license they should have. But we encourage people to get several estimates and consider carefully what you're getting. And then I believe also that it's important for people not to make a large down payment, as you stated. And Last year with the tropical storms, I do have some cases that are pending right now, and the majority of the cases have been with unlicensed contractors. So it is really important for you to protect yourself and hire someone who has a license under Louisiana law.
Yeah. And so a really good point. Y'all kind of echoed some of those things that are really important, why it's important, and then the description of that. I like the general rule of thumb, 45 days and $7,500. That's what I've heard. Mm-hmm. If it's longer than 45 days, they've taken money and they've not started, that's a criminal offense. If it's over $7,500, then that's the threshold, if you will.
You have to have a home improvement license at that threshold. Above $75,000, it's another license. That's a harder license to obtain. But $7,500 is the top where you can work without a license. But we would encourage you, even if your job is less than that, hire somebody who has a license under Louisiana law so that you can have the assistance of the contractors board if you get into trouble.
Yeah.
And just to add what Lisa's saying here, it's the total amount of the job. So you might have several subcontractors that are out there, and their job might be, $5,000 for this job, or $2,000 for this job, and $20,000 for this job. But it's a total of the job, and it doesn't matter whether these things are donated or if they were paid for. It's the total amount, the current market value of these items. And what's really important after going through this process that Ms. Pinu and I have going through is to get a written contract at this point. So after you've gotten some references, after you've spoken to these references, after you've gotten multiple estimates and you find somebody that you're comfortable with, we would implore getting a written contract. And it doesn't have to be you going to an attorney and getting a contract. You can type this up at your home. Mm-hmm. Get a friend to help you type it up and put in there who's doing the work, how long it's going to take, what the materials are going to be used, what you want done. Get a punch list of these items, specifically what you want done, so that you know at the end of the project whether things are completed to your satisfaction. Mm-hmm. And you can always make amendments to this. Sign it with you and the contractor. If you decide at some point in time that different work is needed in a different area, you can always make those amendments at a later time. But the next step in the process to ensuring that you're covered from fraud would be getting a contractor after you've even selected somebody that meets all those standards that we've been talking about.
Okay. Ladies, got about a minute and a half left in this segment. Chrissy, I don't know if there was any additional things you wanted to mention.
Yeah, actually, another way to protect yourself is while this process of the construction is going on, you need to make sure that you keep copies of any type of bills, invoices, communications. Let's say you had a verbal communication, just speaking with the actual contractor about the job, follow it up later with a text message or an email saying, in reference to the conversation we had on Wednesday, just following up that we did agree upon this. So at least you have some type of documentation on that. And while the job is ongoing, you're going to want to monitor it. You're going to want to be out there and take pictures. Make sure that the actual supplies that you are paying for are what's being used. It's not something less than what you paid for. Make sure that the job is to your satisfaction. Let's say you see something and it's not something you agreed upon. Take a picture of it and send it to them at that time, because it's a lot easier to take care of it then than to take care of it once it's all done.
And a picture, a timestamp, it validates and a communication.
Absolutely.
I had communication with one of my builders today. I am going to do that very thing that says, based on our conversation, thank you for clarifying this.
Yes, sir.
And so that's very helpful. I cannot thank y'all enough for coming on, but more importantly for what you do and this task force and how important it is. So we appreciate it very, very much that you guys are really spending all the time, energy, and effort along with the task force to take care of those people that maybe can't do it themselves.
We appreciate y'all having us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us the time to educate the public. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us here.
All right. And that'll do it for this edition of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming when we continue.